Captain Zex Thera clicked his mandibles in frustration as he stared at the smoking remains of his ship's quantum drive. The sleek Valorian cruiser that had carried him across 3 star systems now sat dead in the docking bay of Terra Station, its engine core completely fried. Around him, various alien technicians shook their heads and walked away, muttering in their native tongues about impossible repairs and outdated human technology. The station bustled with activity as beings from dozens of species went about their business. Zex Thera's yellow eyes tracked the movement, noting how the humans seemed to move with a strange confidence that other species lacked. It annoyed him. Humans were barely a century into galactic civilization, yet they acted like they belonged among species that had been traveling the stars for millennia. "No luck with the repairs, Captain?" came a voice behind him. Zex Thera turned to see Commander Hayes, the human station administrator, approaching with that infuriating smile humans always wore. The man's graying hair and weathered face spoke of decades in space, but Zex Thera still considered him little more than a primitive newcomer. "Your technicians are incompetent," Zex Thera hissed, his translator converting the harsh Valorian language into standard galactic. "They claim my quantum drive cannot be repaired without parts that will take months to obtain." Hayes nodded sympathetically. "Quantum drives are tricky. Your ship uses Kethmoran technology, right? That's pretty advanced stuff. Most of our people haven't had much experience with it." "Obviously," Zex Thera said, his tone dripping with disdain. "I should have expected as much from a backwater human station." Instead of taking offense, Hayes chuckled. "Well, we might not have the fanciest equipment, but we've got something else. Human ingenuity. Sometimes that's worth more than all the advanced tools in the galaxy." Zex Thera's mandibles clicked dismissively. "Human ingenuity? Please. Your species has barely learned to tie their shoes in cosmic terms." "Maybe so," Hayes said, still smiling. "But I'll tell you what. I've got a kid here who might surprise you. Sarah Chen. She's only 17, but she's got a gift for making broken things work again." The Valorian captain's eyes widened in disbelief. "You are suggesting that a human child could repair technology that your adult experts cannot?" "I'm not just suggesting it," Hayes said, his grin growing wider. "I'm willing to bet on it. If Sarah can't get your ship running again, I'll personally cover the cost of shipping you to the nearest Valorian outpost. But if she succeeds..." He paused, clearly enjoying himself. "You publicly acknowledge that human ingenuity is worth respecting." Zex Thera's pride flared. The idea that a human teenager could succeed where experienced alien engineers had failed was absurd. It was an insult to his intelligence and to the sophisticated technology of his people. But the offer was too good to refuse. A free ride home if the child failed, which was inevitable. "Very well, human," he said, extending one of his forearms. "I accept your wager." 20 minutes later, Zex Thera found himself standing beside his damaged ship, watching in amazement as a small human female crawled out from beneath the quantum drive housing. Sarah Chen was indeed young, with short black hair tied back in a practical ponytail and grease stains on her coveralls. She moved with the quick, confident motions of someone completely at home around machinery. "Wow," Sarah said, wiping her hands on a rag. "This is some seriously cool tech. Kethmoran quantum drives are like legendary. I've only seen pictures in textbooks." Zex Thera watched with growing irritation as the girl examined his ship's engine with obvious enthusiasm, rather than the proper reverence such advanced technology deserved. "Child, this drive represents 10,000 years of Kethmoran engineering evolution. It is not a toy." Sarah looked up at him with bright brown eyes. "Oh, I know. That's what makes this so awesome. The quantum entanglement matrix is way more elegant than anything we build. But..." She paused, frowning slightly. "There's something weird about the failure pattern." "Weird?" Zex Thera demanded. "What do you mean weird?" "Well, look at this," Sarah said, pointing to a section of the drive core. "The quantum resonance chamber is completely burned out. Right? But the cascade failure should have spread to these secondary systems too. Instead, It looks like something redirected the energy discharge at the last second. Zexthara bent down to look where she was pointing. He had to admit, the girl's observation was accurate. The damage pattern was indeed unusual, though he failed to see how that helped with repairs. The quantum matrix crystals are totally fried, Sarah continued, running her hands along the damaged components. But the good news is, the core architecture is still intact. We just need to rebuild the resonance chamber and replace the crystals. With what? Zexthara asked mockingly. As every competent technician has already explained, Keth-Moran quantum crystals are impossible to replicate and take months to obtain. Sarah grinned. Who said anything about Keth-Moran crystals? Before Zexthara could respond, the girl had disappeared into a storage locker, emerging moments later with an armload of components that looked nothing like proper quantum drive parts. There were pieces of what appeared to be human communication equipment, some kind of primitive power coupling, and several crystalline structures that Zexthara didn't recognize at all. What is that junk? He demanded. This junk, Sarah said cheerfully, is going to get you flying again, see? The thing about quantum drives is that they don't actually care what kind of crystals you use, as long as they can maintain quantum coherence. These crystals came out of an old Earth entertainment system, but they've got the same basic properties as your Keth-Moran ones. They're just arranged differently. Zexthara watched in growing alarm as Sarah began dismantling sections of his ship's drive with casual efficiency. Stop. You cannot simply. This is not how quantum engineering works. Sure it is, Sarah said, not looking up from her work. Quantum mechanics are universal. The Keth-Morans just have a really elegant way of implementing them. But elegant isn't the same as necessary. For the next 3 hours, Zexthara stood frozen between fascination and horror as the human teenager systematically rebuilt his quantum drive, using what could only be described as garbage. She worked with an intuitive understanding of the technology that seemed impossible for someone so young, especially someone from such a technologically primitive species. Sarah rewired quantum coupling systems using human fiber optic cables. She replaced precision-manufactured resonance chambers with modified components from a food replicator. Most shocking of all, she somehow convinced the drive's quantum matrix to accept Earth entertainment crystals as substitutes for irreplaceable Keth-Moran components. This is impossible, Zexthara muttered as Sarah made final adjustments to the rebuilt drive. Quantum drives require precise harmonic resonance. You cannot simply substitute random components. You're right, Sarah agreed, connecting the last power coupling. But you can substitute components that do the same job, even if they do it differently. Physics is physics. Right? She stepped back and wiped her hands on her coveralls again. Okay, try starting her up. Zexthara approached his ship's control panel with deep reluctance. Every instinct told him that the cobbled-together drive would either fail completely or explode spectacularly. He activated the startup sequence and waited for disaster. Instead, the quantum drive hummed to life, with a sound unlike anything he had ever heard from Keth-Moran technology. The harmonics were different, almost musical, but the readings on his instruments showed perfect quantum coherence across all systems. His ship was not only functional, according to the diagnostics, it was running better than it had before the breakdown. Zexthara stared at his instrument panel, in complete disbelief. The quantum efficiency readings were showing numbers he had never seen before. His ship's drive was not just working, it was performing 15% above factory specifications. The impossible hybrid system that Sarah had cobbled together was somehow superior to the original Keth-Moran technology. How? He whispered, his four hands trembling as they moved across the controls. Sarah beamed with pride as she watched him examine the readings. Pretty cool, right? The Earth crystals actually have better quantum retention than Keth-Moran ones. They just need different harmonic frequencies to maintain coherence. Once I figured out the resonance patterns, it was just a matter of building an interface that could translate between the two systems. You figured out resonance patterns, Zexthara repeated slowly. In 3 hours. Resonance patterns that took Keth-Moran engineers centuries to develop. Well, I had an advantage, Sarah said, settling down on a maintenance crate. I could see how your drive was supposed to work by looking at the existing architecture. Reverse engineering is way easier than starting from scratch. Zexthera felt something he rarely experienced. Genuine curiosity about another being's thought processes. Explain to me exactly what you did. Sarah's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. Okay, so quantum drives work by creating entangled particle pairs, right? The Keth-Moran approach uses these super pure crystals to maintain quantum states across vast distances. But purity isn't everything. Sometimes impurities actually make quantum systems more stable. She pointed to one of the modified components. Earth entertainment crystals have trace amounts of rare earth metals that create natural quantum interference patterns. Instead of fighting those patterns like the Keth-Morans do, I decided to work with them. That should have caused cascade failure, Zexthara insisted. It would have, if I'd tried to force the earth crystals to behave exactly like Keth-Moran ones. Instead, I built a harmonic buffer system using components from 3 different technologies. The buffer translates quantum states between the different crystal types in real time. Zexthara studied the bizarre collection of human and alien components that now formed his ship's heart. The engineering was unlike anything he had ever seen, combining technologies that had no business working together. Yet somehow, it worked better than the original system. You created a universal quantum interface, he said. The implications, slowly dawning on him. In 3 hours. Using spare parts. Sarah shrugged. It's not that big a deal. Humans are pretty good at making different things work together. We've had to be. Our planet has like 200 different countries, all with different technologies and approaches to problems. We learned early that the best solutions usually come from combining ideas rather than sticking to one perfect system. Before Zexthara could respond, Commander Hayes appeared at the entrance to the docking bay. How's it going in here? I heard the drive startup sequence. The child. Zexthara began, then stopped himself. Sarah has successfully repaired my vessel. Sarah has successfully repaired my vessel. Hayes grinned. I told you human ingenuity was worth respecting. Zexthara wanted to argue, but the evidence was literally humming around him. His ship was running better than it ever had, thanks to a 17-year-old human who had solved problems that stumped experienced engineers from multiple species. I do not understand, he admitted finally. How does someone so young possess such knowledge? I'm not that smart, Sarah protested. I just approach problems differently than most alien engineers do. You guys tend to think in terms of perfect systems and pure components. Humans learned to work with whatever we had available. She's being modest, Hayes added. Sarah's been taking apart and rebuilding machines since she was 8 years old. Last year, she jury-rigged a communication array that let us contact ships 3 times farther away than our official range. Before that, she figured out how to modify our air recycling systems to process atmosphere from 6 different species instead of just 3. Zexthara looked between the 2 humans, trying to process what he was hearing. You are saying that this level of innovation is common among your species? Not common exactly, Hayes said. But not rare either. Humans have this gift for seeing possibilities where other species see limitations. We've been making do with insufficient resources for our entire history. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. Like, when the first humans went to space, our rockets were basically controlled explosions held together with wishful thinking. But we made it work because we had to. We're really good at taking things that shouldn't work and making them work anyway. Zexthara felt a strange sensation in his chest that he slowly recognized as respect. Not just for Sarah's technical skills, but for the entire approach to problem-solving that humans seem to embody. Where other species sought perfection and purity, humans embraced chaos and improvisation. Your species is more remarkable than I realized, he said quietly. We try, Hayes said with typical human understatement. As the conversation continued, word of Sarah's success began to spread throughout the station. Soon, aliens from multiple species were arriving to examine the impossible repair job. A Kthari engineer spent 20 minutes scanning the modified drive with increasingly sophisticated instruments. muttering in amazement at readings that defied conventional understanding. "The quantum coherence is perfect," the Cathari announced to the growing crowd. "Better than perfect. I have never seen such efficiency from a hybrid system." A Nexarian scientist pushed forward to examine Sarah's work. "The theoretical framework behind this modification should not be possible. You are using crystalline structures from 3 different technological traditions simultaneously." 4. "Actually," Sarah corrected cheerfully, "the harmonic buffer includes some Valorian plasma conduits I found in the scrap heap." The Nexarian's tentacles writhed in what Zexthara recognized as extreme agitation. "That is impossible. Valorian plasma technology is completely incompatible with Kethmoran quantum systems. Not if you use a frequency modulator to bridge the gap," Sarah explained, pulling up a schematic on her tablet. "See, Valorian plasma conduits operate on harmonic frequencies that are exactly double the resonance of Kethmoran crystals. If you create an interface that can translate between those frequencies," she went on to explain her modifications in detail, drawing an audience of increasingly amazed alien engineers. Zexthara watched with growing pride, as beings who had initially dismissed humans as primitive newcomers began asking Sarah detailed questions about her techniques. The young human answered every question with patience and enthusiasm, often suggesting modifications that could improve the questioner's own technology. She seemed genuinely excited to share her knowledge and learn from others in return. "Remarkable," whispered a elderly Kethmoran engineer, who had arrived to examine the modified drive. "In 800 years of quantum engineering, I have never considered such approaches." "That's probably because you've been thinking about it for 800 years, Sarah said with a grin. "Sometimes it helps to look at problems with fresh eyes." As the crowd of alien observers continued to grow, Zexthara found himself in the unfamiliar position of feeling proud of a human's achievements. The girl's work was not just impressive, it was revolutionary. She had casually solved problems that had puzzled some of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. More importantly, she had done it with a smile and an eagerness to help that seemed to characterize her entire species. Where other races might have hoarded such innovations or demanded payment, Sarah freely shared her knowledge with anyone who asked. "I believe I owe you an apology," Zexthara said to Commander Hayes, as the crowd continued to examine Sarah's work. "For what?" "For underestimating your species. And for failing to recognize the value of what you call human ingenuity." Hayes smiled. "No apology necessary, Captain. Humans can seem pretty chaotic to species that prefer order and predictability. But chaos has its own advantages." 3 weeks later, Zexthara stood in the Central Assembly Hall of the Galactic Engineering Council, on Nexus Prime, the most prestigious technical forum in known space. Before him sat representatives from 47 species, including some of the most brilliant minds in the galaxy. And behind him, looking slightly nervous but determined, stood Sarah Chen. The formal presentation had been Zexthara's idea. After witnessing Sarah's revolutionary approach to quantum engineering, he realized that her innovations needed to be shared with the broader galactic community. But convincing the council to listen to a human teenager had required all of his influence as a respected Valorian captain. "Honored colleagues," Zexthara began, his translator converting his words for the diverse audience. 3 weeks ago, my vessel suffered what I believe to be irreparable damage to its quantum drive system. Multiple expert technicians from various species examined the problem and concluded that repairs would require months of waiting for replacement components. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The quantum drive problems of a single ship were hardly worthy of council attention. However, Zexthara continued, a human engineer succeeded in not only repairing the damage, but in improving the system's performance by 15%, using components salvaged from what most would consider technological refuse. The murmurs grew louder. Several council members leaned forward with interest, while others displayed obvious skepticism. "The engineer in question," Zexthara said, stepping aside, "is Sarah Chen, age 17, of the human colony ship Terra Station." A wave of shocked silence swept through the assembly. In the 800-year history of the Galactic Engineering Council, no human had ever been invited to present. No teenager of any species had been granted such an honor. Councillor Vexani of the Kethmoran delegation rose to his feet. Captain Zex Thara, with respect. This assembly deals with advanced theoretical engineering. We cannot waste time on primitive modifications. Primitive? Sarah stepped forward, her tablet in hand. Sir, with respect, I'd like to show you something that might change your mind. Before anyone could object, she activated a holographic display that filled the air above the assembly floor. The three-dimensional image showed Zex Thara's quantum drive, but with technical annotations that made even the most advanced engineers in the room lean forward for a better look. This is a real-time quantum coherence map of the modified drive, Sarah explained, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. As you can see, the hybrid crystal matrix maintains perfect entanglement across all frequency ranges, while simultaneously improving energy efficiency by 15%. Councillor Vexani's crystalline features shifted into what Zex Thara recognized as confusion. That readout cannot be accurate. Hybrid quantum systems always suffer from coherence degradation. Not if you use adaptive harmonic translation, Sarah said, manipulating the display to show the drive's internal workings. See? The problem with traditional quantum engineering is that everyone tries to eliminate variables, but sometimes variables are actually solutions. She zoomed in on the crystal matrix, highlighting the Earth entertainment crystals she had used as replacements. These crystals have natural quantum interference patterns that would normally disrupt a Kethmoran drive. But instead of fighting those patterns, I built a translation matrix that converts the interference into useful resonance. The assembly hall erupted in excited chatter as engineers from multiple species began recognizing the implications of what they were seeing. Sarah's approach didn't just solve one specific problem. It suggested an entirely new framework for quantum engineering. Dr. Zeth Mora, the renowned Nexarian quantum theorist, rose from her seat. Young human, are you suggesting that quantum instability can be deliberately harnessed for improved performance? Exactly. Sarah's face lit up with enthusiasm. Every quantum system has natural fluctuations, right? Most engineering focuses on suppressing those fluctuations. But what if instead of suppressing them, we learn to redirect them? She gestured, and the hologram shifted to show a theoretical framework that made several council members gasp in recognition. I call it adaptive quantum engineering. Instead of building systems that resist change, we build systems that evolve with their environment. Councillor Vexani stood again, his tone more respectful now. This is unprecedented. You are proposing a fundamental paradigm shift in quantum mechanics application. I'm proposing that we stop thinking of imperfection as a flaw, Sarah said simply. Humans learned a long time ago that the best solutions often come from working with limitations, instead of trying to eliminate them. Dr. Zeth Mora tentacles writhed with excitement. Show us more. How broadly can these principles be applied? For the next hour, Sarah walked the assembly through a series of theoretical modifications that could revolutionize everything from faster-than-light communication to planetary defense systems. She showed how adaptive quantum principles could make interstellar navigation more reliable, how they could improve energy efficiency across multiple technologies, and how they might even solve some of the galaxy's most persistent engineering challenges. The beautiful thing about this approach, Sarah concluded, is that it doesn't require any new discoveries or exotic materials. It just requires thinking about existing technology in a different way. When she finished, the assembly hall was completely silent. Then, slowly, Councillor Vexani began to applaud. One by one, representatives from 47 species rose to their feet in recognition of what they had just witnessed. Young Engineer Chen, Dr. Zeth Mora said when the applause finally died down. The Galactic Engineering Council would be honored to offer you a full research fellowship. Your insights could benefit the entire galaxy. Sarah looked surprised and pleased, but also uncertain. That's incredibly generous. But I'm not sure I'm ready for something that big. I mean, I'm still learning, which is precisely why your perspective is so valuable, said another council member. You approach problems without the preconceptions that limit more experienced engineers. Zexthera watched with pride as the galaxy's most prestigious engineering body essentially competed to offer opportunities to the human teenager who had fixed his ship with spare parts. But he wasn't surprised. In the weeks since Sarah's repair job, he had seen similar reactions from engineers throughout known space. Word of her innovations was spreading rapidly through technical communities. Other humans were beginning to be sought out for their unique problem-solving approaches. The galaxy was starting to recognize that humanity's chaotic, improvisational style might be exactly what centuries of ordered, traditional engineering needed. "I'll need to think about it," Sarah said diplomatically, "and I should probably finish my education first." "Of course," Dr. Zethmora agreed. "But please know that the Council's door will always be open to you and to other human engineers. Your species brings perspectives that we desperately need." As the formal session concluded, and representatives from various species approached Sarah with questions and offers, Zexthera reflected on how dramatically his understanding had changed. 3 weeks ago, he had considered humans to be primitive newcomers with little to offer galactic civilization. Now, he realized that their apparent chaos was actually a form of order that more advanced species had forgotten. Humans didn't just solve problems, they redefined what problems meant. They didn't just build technology, they imagined new relationships between different technologies. They didn't just adapt to limitations, they transformed limitations into advantages. "Captain Zexthera," Sarah said, approaching him as the crowds began to disperse. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I never dreamed I'd get to address the Galactic Engineering Council." "Thank you," Zexthera replied, "for showing me that wisdom and innovation have nothing to do with age or species. Your modifications to my ship changed more than just my quantum drive." Sarah grinned. "Well, humans have this saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if it is broke, fix it better than it was before." Zexthera clicked his mandibles in what humans had taught him was analogous to laughter. "I think the galaxy is going to learn a great deal from human sayings." As they left the assembly hall together, Zexthera couldn't help but smile at the irony. He had dared a human teenager to repair his vessel, expecting her to fail spectacularly. Instead, she had succeeded beyond anyone's imagination, and in doing so, had begun to repair something far more significant: the galaxy's understanding of what was possible when different approaches to knowledge worked together. The girl who had crawled under his quantum drive with a toolkit full of spare parts had emerged as one of the most promising engineering minds in known space. And Zexthera, who had once dismissed human ingenuity as primitive chaos, now found himself proud to be associated with the species that dared to see solutions where others saw only problems. In the days that followed, as news of Sarah's presentation spread throughout the galaxy, Zexthera would often be asked about his role in discovering such a remarkable talent. He always gave the same answer: he hadn't discovered anything. He had simply been lucky enough to witness what happened when human ingenuity was given a chance to shine.